English translation, 505th contact. Thursday, 18th of November, 2010, 22:10 hours.
Nice of you to come again today. I only told Florena that after all the trouble with the computer, it is now working again after Piero fixed it for about 2 hours in the early evening. He probably told me why I could not start it up again despite 48 attempts, but I still do not understand the whole thing. But I see that you have digested your anger, and that you waited an hour in vain. I am sorry.
It was really annoying, but now everything is okay again. So now we can turn to the work with the Talmud.
That is indeed good, but I have something important to discuss first, which has come up in the meantime.
If that is your desire, then speak.
Last Saturday, Atlantis should have gone to Munich with Bernadette. This was in connection with the establishment of the FIGU National Group Germany. That the two of them will carry out this task for the next 6 to 8 months is in accordance with an overall group decision. Unfortunately, it turned out that Atlantis was not able to go last Saturday, because the board of directors refused to exchange the night watch, which had fallen on Friday night for him. As far as I know, however, he should have been allowed to go, according to a provision of Quetzal, which was also accepted by the core group. Quetzal's provision was issued by him on the 21st of November 1987. This was also followed by the overall group decision that this provision should apply. However, this was apparently not recorded correctly, and fell out of sight and out of mind. Do you know anything about it?
This is known to me, but I do not know the wording of Quetzal's provision. If you must have it, I can get the text from him. It is annoying, however, that against a given provision and against the associated group decision was violated. Such wrongdoing should not have happened for a long time now.
That would be good, by which I mean both what you just said regarding the mishandling of the refusal of the night watch exchange, and also that you want to retrieve Quetzal's text of the provision.
But it takes about 15 to 20 minutes before I can get an answer.
All right, we can turn to the Talmudic work in the meantime.
Good. Then I will now send the request to Quetzal.
35 minutes later.
Here, this is Quetzal's answer, which I will dictate to you in a moment, so that you can put it in writing. 1st November 1987. Core group members are not allowed to perform night watch when, in order to perform their duties for the FIGU Association, they have to drive more than 200 kilometers in a vehicle and perform their assigned task. This is valid up to 24 hours before the time of the task fulfillment. Respectively, there must not be a burden of night watch and lack of sleep during these hours. This is for the safety of the group members concerned. If they drive with a vehicle to a place where the task is to be performed, then it must also be ensured that overtiredness does not cause an accident. On the other hand, the provision also serves to ensure that clear senses are given for the completion of the task. This provision is irrevocable because safety in the best framework takes precedence over all duties.
Exactly, that was it. I found the following note about it in my notes folder. Not a night watch, who has to drive more than 200 kilometers for the completion of work for the FIGU, is valid until 24 hours before completion of duty.
It is very unfortunate that such mishandling occurs.
There are probably several reasons for this. On the one hand, the minutes were probably only kept in notes, after which they were executed according to interpretation, and consequently not exactly what was actually spoken and decided was added in writing. On the other hand, I also see a worm in the fact that various members were not on the ball at the general meetings and did not understand anything that was being talked about and voted on correctly. Disinterest also perhaps played a certain role, which then also led to the fact that no attention was paid and consequently everything was forgotten. That was indeed the case at that time, so that decisions simply fell out of mind, and today hardly anyone knows anything about them. So I have to rummage through my own memory and also my old notes, so that everything can be sorted out again.
It is good that you were able to bring your memory back to a good state after your serious breakdown in 1982.
There are still many gaps in my memory concerning my life, but it is important to know at least the most important things again after I lost my memory. What I still want to say is that it should be clear that when a decision is made, as in the case of Atlantis and Bernadette, to build up the FIGU national group in Germany in a correct way, this applies to the Night Watch and other services for the whole period of building up the group, and not for every related absence and downtime of duties, nor especially for the board of directors to decide whether an absence can or must be granted or not. Basically, the whole thing is clarified when an overall group decision gives some members a task that has to be fulfilled. In such cases, it should be nevertheless simply in such a way that the task determined with other members can arrange independently exchanges of the obligations, according to which they must announce their exchange of obligations only to the responsible persons responsible, like for example that respectively the regulators of vigilance and the president.
This is common sense and should be kept as it is. Then this is also discussed, and we can get down to work.
Once that's done, then I still have at least two things that are on my stomach. On the one hand, the geoglyphs of Nazca and Mount Shasta, and on the other hand, the Ascot photo. I would like to talk about the picture before we turn to the Talmud. The other one we can discuss after the Talmud work.
As you wish, dear friend. Obviously, you are very keen to talk about it.
It is very important to me. Look here, these photos are from the internet. They are the fake photos of Ascot and the alleged American doppelganger. However, I cannot see the very great similarity that has been talked about all these years, only a certain similarity. By doppelganger, I imagine that two human beings are so strikingly similar that they are not, or hardly distinguishable from each other. Here, however, this is proven by these pictures, which Piero took out of the internet and put into my computer, that there is only a certain similarity. So there is not a doppelganger, or do you see it differently? What do you say? Which picture represents Ascot and which the so-called doppelganger? It is also not to be understood that you never told me anything about this.
I see these juxtaposed pictures for the first time, because I have never bothered about how the doppelganger should look. That was probably a mistake I made carelessly. What I told you about the fake was based only on the fact that I told you the information that was distributed and that your photo was manipulated, like the one that showed Ascot and Nera. What I had seen for myself were only the falsified pictures with our flying apparatus. It was really careless of me not to deal with the Ascot photo and with the alleged doppelganger. That the photo is also listed on the internet, I did not know that any more than you did, because we have long since finished these unpleasant things with the photo forgeries. So we did not bother about it anymore, which was obviously a mistake, but on the other hand would probably also have been of no use, because the slanderous machinations of the opponents certainly cannot be stopped and cannot be stopped. Too much envy and hatred of the adversaries is in their thinking and striving against you. It is very difficult for all of them to accept that you will not be impressed by their evil and slanderous machinations and intrigues, and that you will unswervingly continue your mission. But to your question, in this photo here, Ascot is clearly visible on the left side, while the person on the right side must be the alleged doppelganger, who in fact only bears some resemblance to Ascot, but not a real doppelganger. The comparison with her to Ascot is ridiculous. The facial expression of Ascot does not match that of the person resembling her, nor does the shape and fullness of the face. The mouth, chin, and eye areas are also recognizably different. Asket also has a long and narrow neck, while the person resembling him clearly indicates a short and firm, respectively thick neck. The hair color also does not match, because the person resembling the likeness obviously has hair that is obviously dyed white blonde, while Asket has darker hair, which however has obviously been changed by photographic manipulation and should probably be adapted to the person resembling the likeness. From this alone, it is clearly recognizable that the two pictures represent two different female persons. It was probably careless of me not to have looked at the comparison pictures earlier in order to express my opinion that there is no real doppelganger between the Asket and the similarity person, but only a certain similarity.
I also only found out this Thursday evening, when Piero showed me the pictures from the internet. What this picture now shows tells me that the photo in Guido's book is actually not showing Asket and Nera. So we have to correct this by putting this photo here in Guido's book and an explanation. But you should clarify very carefully if the photo in Guido's book is a fake.
This is necessary, in my opinion. I agree with you, but it will take time. It would probably be good if, for example, Hans-Georg or Bernadette would write something suitable for it, and you would also enclose our current conversation. But now, dear friend, we should turn to the Talmud, because there are still some corrections to be made, which you are to correct tomorrow. That is why I have come here again so quickly, so that you can do your correction work. If this were not the case, I would have come back only on Saturday. So it was good that you immediately informed Florena when Piero had got your computer working again. So she could immediately inform me that I could come back here.
Good. I have no more objections to our turning to the Talmud. Then let us get started.
That was the necessary, which still had to be corrected. And what you have to work out for the comprehensive introduction, you now also know.
I will have it ready by Saturday. Then I would like to come back with the other questions now, if it is okay with you.
Of course.
So then, first, a question about Mount Shasta, respectively, about the distant descendants of extraterrestrials who lived there, which I talked about several times with your daughter, Simya Say, but also with you. Here I have an excerpt of Simya Say's conversation, which I copied from the 34th Contact Report of the 3rd of December 1975.
The Mount Shasta, however, is not the only place where this race lives, because they already divided into 3 smaller races at very early times, with what the 2 others live unrecognized deeply underground on the Aleutian Islands and in Alaska. The whole population is only about 700 human beings.
Quetzal once told me outside of an official conversation that you took all the inhabitants from Mount Shasta and on the Aleutian Islands and in Alaska.
That is correct. We have tried to get all the inhabitants of the 3 places to return to their peoples, with whom they have always been in contact. We gave them the reasons for our own withdrawal from the earth, which led to their withdrawal. Their dwellings and all the trappings have returned them to their original earthly state, so that there is no longer anything to indicate their former presence. The process in this regard was the same as in the Pyramid of Giza and on Mars.
I understand. So then you did not take them away yourselves, but they left of their own accord with those who came from their original homeland, but simply on your advice. I have misunderstood something. But can you tell me where these human beings actually belonged, respectively to which people?
That is not a secret. They were distant descendants of a lineage of the old Lyrans, to which they also returned.
Then they are, so to speak, related to you, the Plearan, because the Plearan peoples came out of the old Lyrans.
That is correct.
Thank you. So there is now nothing in Mount Shasta, Alaska, or the Aleutian Islands that indicates their former presence.
That is also correct.
And may we know what you told them that they went away?
That is not a secret. The reason was that we too had abolished our stations on Earth and returned them to their natural original state. But it was important that we had included the inhabitants of all three places in our protection, which was not given after we had left. So a further stay on Earth would have been too dangerous for them.
I can also understand that. Then I have a question again, which is related to the Night Watch exchange regarding a duty fulfillment trip that is over 200 kilometers. As I recall, at that time the vote only applied to compulsory journeys and duty fulfillment journeys that are issued by core group decisions.
I also understand this as such decisions are only to be made and implemented in connection with tasks assigned by the core group, and the private affairs of the members must not be affected. Private and association matters may not be combined, because privately related matters of all kinds fall exclusively within the personal responsibility and self-determination of the members.
What is thus private must also remain private, and association matters remain association matters.
That must be the case. Otherwise, the association loses its independence, and also all the private matters of the members lose their validity if the private and the association-related matters are mixed together. And if that happens also only once, then that is the beginning of a next such action, which then reaches ever further around itself, whereby in the long run a final mixture comes off, and the members lose their independence, self-determination, and liberty, just like also the association. Unfortunately, this fact is not always intellectually immediately comprehensible to human beings, which then leads to wrong decisions and takes the form, as it is the case with sects, which combine their sectarianism with the private life of the misguided followers. As a result, these fall under a coercive force and humbly obey their sect leader and in fear connect their whole private life with the sect and its machinations. And this must not be the case with the Figu Association under any circumstances. Every single member must be guaranteed his freedom and individuality as well as his will for his own decision, for independence, self-determination, and for the absolutely private in every respect. If only one time it is not acted upon, then a foundation is laid for the merging of the private and the club-related, which then inevitably degenerates into sectarian machinations.
This is completely in line with my intentions, and I will also explain the matter accordingly, because we have to talk about the whole thing in the group. You're absolutely right in what you say, because just as one exception leads to the next and many more, the same thing happens in our association, if even one single thing of the private is connected with the association.
Undoubtedly.
But one more question. In the answer that you have from Quetzal there in your device, is there also something regarding the determination and decision of the core group regarding the exchange of the Night Watch?
Yes, but you cannot read it because it is transcribed in our scripture. The provision in resolution was that any night watch duty that cannot be fulfilled as a result of the resolution must be exchanged with another night watch duty member.
Then this may not be done with a jumper?
According to Quetzal's record here, it was determined and decided that if an exchange has to take place because a special duty has to be fulfilled, this must not exclude the regular duty, because this would violate the equal rights with regard to the regular duty. If the vigilance would not be exchanged, then another member would have to take over the duty and thus perform more than the member who has to fulfill a special duty, which in any case falls outside the regular duty. The assumption and fulfillment of special duties is not covered by a provision, but rather by the voluntary nature of those who are involved in a special duty.
Uh-huh. But we have made some decisions in the core group regarding the deployment of jumpers. But that was years later, just after 1987.
This is not relevant with regard to Quetzal's determination and the core group's unalterable decision, so it cannot be taken into consideration. What the group has decided and continues to decide outside of Quetzal's unalterable provisions and the corresponding decisions of the core group is and remains solely up to them. The group may add new provisions to Quetzal's provisions and the decisions of the core group, but the existing Quetzal provisions must remain in place and unchanged. This is because the provisions and decisions are of vital importance for the existence and order of the association. Of course, the core group is also free to create any necessary regulations and to make any necessary decisions at its own discretion. But it must always and unconditionally be emphasized that they are in conformity with the mission and also with the spirit and the guidelines of the Figu Association.
In the 1990s, we adopted regulations concerning the duty to jump, which refer to various incidents such as illness, military, civil defense, deaths of family members, relatives and friends, official orders and work, etc. What is with this?
These are factors that do not fall within the scope of the Figu Association. Thus, such things become purely private matters in which the association may not interfere. So, it would also not be right if members had to make up for any obligations for such things. This is not a voluntarily assumed special duty, but rather externally determined orders and decisions for and against which those affected by them cannot do anything. In the following, it corresponds to the justice, if by the factors mentioned failures arise with the fulfillment of obligations, that then in the sense of the equality, the equal rights and community, for the failing members, the obligations are taken over and accomplished by other members. And this is exactly what you have regulated on your own initiative by a corresponding resolution.
Right, and it is clearly explained. Now I have another question regarding the geoglyphs in the Nazca Plain. In volumes 3 and 5, I copied out the following sections.
Volume 3, 119th Contact Report, the 3rd of February, 1979.
Good. Then you also know what he wrote, for example, about the so-called Nazca Plain, which is in Peru, if I am correctly oriented.
I know what he reports about it, sure.
Okay. And what are the alleged air signals or airfields, etc. really about?
The creations represent an astrological calendar and an astrological garden. In earlier times, when these facilities were still in operation and used for astrological purposes, the giant signs were surrounded by gardens, from which the astrological signs such as park paths, etc. stood out. They were made by Earth humans without any influence of extraterrestrial intelligence.
Volume 5, 216th Contact Report, the 16th of March, 1987.
Then again, I have a question regarding the pre-Columbian Nazca Indian culture, respectively regarding the Nazca Indians who lived in the valleys and areas of Nazca, Ica and Pisco, and who made giant scratch paintings in the desert plain which have been preserved until today. I asked about them before, and the answer I got was that these pictures were astrology gardens. I mean to this explanation, but it was later noted that the actual purpose of these huge slash-and-burn pictures did not only serve astrology. Unfortunately, no further explanation was given because I did not ask further questions. That is what I would like to do now with this. So what is the real purpose of these giant pictures?
At the time of the Nazca culture, the Nazca scratch pictures, as you call them, formed a large ritual site in their entirety, and thus can be spoken of a ritual garden, an astrology ritual garden, or a ritual region respectively, a ritual landscape. The rituals performed there corresponded to religious rituals, and thus to acts of faith. The types of rituals serve different purposes, but fertility rituals were the most common forms that were performed at these cult sites, respectively ritual sites. Like the Stonehenge complexes north of Salisbury, Wiltshire in southern England respectively, the megalithic complexes, the Nazca complexes also served as general assembly places, as well as places of judgment and execution.
So all other statements are nonsense. For example, the ones that the scratch pictures mark respectively show underground watercourses, or that they are prehistoric airfields of, or for, extraterrestrials, as also Erich von Däniken and others fantasize. These graffiti pictures in the desert plain of southern Peru represent huge geometric figures, also animals, plants, and human beings, which can only be recognized in their full form from a certain height. For this reason, one could think that the pictures could have been created somehow by precise instructions from a certain height. My question now: even today, various archaeologists still know what the scratch paintings, respectively the geoglyphs, and the figures really represent. They are also not in agreement about what the whole thing was actually meant for. Again and again there are new interpretations. Do you have other or further insights, or do you stick to what Sim Yase and Ketzel said?
What my daughter and Ketzel have explained corresponds to our knowledge, which we did not gain through research, but which was given to us through direct observations, and which is recorded in records. The content of the excerpts from the Contact Report Volumes 3 and 5 is therefore completely correct.
Thanks, that is what I wanted to know. I recently saw another program on television about this. As usual, it was explained again that the mystery of the scratch pictures, respectively the geoglyphs, is still not solved. Then all questions are solved now.
Then we can now turn to the work with the Talmud Emmanuel.
We can do that. How much longer do you think we will have to work on it?
There is still a lot to do. You should also deal with something concerning the naming of the believers with regard to the main religions.
I will do so then.